Hello, I'm Reverend Scott Wipperman, pastor here at First Presbyterian Church in Helena, Montana, and we welcome you to our worship service today. I'd like you to know that regardless of who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, you're welcome here at First Presbyterian Church. From the Old Testament, we have a reading from Ezekiel, from the beginning of Ezekiel. And Ezekiel has seen God, or heard from God, and has fallen face down on the ground, and that's where this reading picks up. He, God, said to me, "Son of man, stand up on your feet, and I will speak to you." As he spoke, the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet, and I heard him speaking to me. He said, "Son of man, I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their fathers have been in revolt against me to this very day. The people to whom I'm sending you are obstinate and stubborn. Say to them, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says.' And whether they listen to you or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious house, they will know that a prophet has been among them." And from our gospel reading from Mark, Jesus has been ministering for a while. He has gone to places and taught, and now he's coming to Nazareth, his hometown. He has been ministering on the north side of the Sea of Galilee primarily, in Capernaum and areas around there. And Nazareth is about halfway west between the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean Sea. And he goes to his hometown, and this is where the reading picks up. Jesus left there and went to his hometown, Nazareth, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things?" they asked. "What's this wisdom that has been given to him, that he even does miracles? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son, and the brother of Joseph and James and Judas and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown, among his relatives and his own house, is a prophet without honor." He could not do any miracles there, except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Calling the 12 to him, he sent them out by twos and gave them the authority over evil spirits. These were his instructions: "Take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear your sandals, but not an extra tunic. And whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave, as a testimony against them." They went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. The word of the Lord. Well, our readings start with Ezekiel. God calls Ezekiel to be a prophet. He was just someone who took care of sheep in vineyards, but God calls him to be a prophet with a little bit of a warning. "I'm sending you to speak to the Israelites." And at this point in time, the Israelites were in captivity in Babylon, a very stubborn and obstinate people, as God says. So go speak to them. Some will listen to you, and some won't. And Paul, he speaks kind of strangely about this one who went to this heaven, who saw wonderful things, and he'd brag about this person, but this person happens to be Paul speaking about himself in the third person. So he'd brag about that person, but he wouldn't brag about himself. Because if he bragged about himself, people might be led to think more of him than was warranted by his words and his actions. If he bragged about himself, people might have a hard time seeing him for the prophet that he was called to be by God. And then Jesus goes to his hometown, goes back to where people knew him, and preaches in the synagogue, and people are amazed. They're dazzled with what he's saying. But then they remember that, oh yeah, this is that carpenter boy, Mary's son, and the brother of people we know. We've known this guy forever. He's just a commoner. And they looked upon him with disdain. We can't lift this guy up because he's just a normal person. That would put us down. And so they don't see who Jesus is. Somehow they miss these words that he's saying. And then Jesus sends the 12 out 2 by 2 to cities to go preach the good news. And they go out there and they preach. And in some places, they're received. And they drive out evil spirits. And they heal people through anointing with oil. And in some places, they don't see these 12 as prophets. And they leave the city by kicking off the dust on their feet, which was a tradition amongst the Jews when they were leaving places like where Gentiles lived to show that they weren't taking anything of the Gentiles with them. Sometimes these villages could see the disciples as prophets, and sometimes they couldn't. Now it's interesting. In the Ezekiel story, God says, I'm going to send you amongst people, and some of them will listen to you, and some of them will not. But everyone will know that they've been in the presence of a prophet. Yet when God shows up on earth, God incarnate, come down to earth, and goes to speak to people in his hometown, some of them, apparently many of them, could not see the prophet in Jesus, could not hear his words. And you think they would, right? They spent 30 years growing up with Jesus. They knew this guy. And yeah, he was just a carpenter. And maybe he wasn't anyone special. But you think they would remember there were some special things around his birth. You know, some angels came and said some pretty marvelous things about Jesus and who he was going to be. And when they took him to the temple to be baptized, Simeon and Anna came up, these complete strangers that were at the temple waiting to see the messenger from God, and they saw Jesus. They said, this is the one. And when he's 12, he ditches his parents and sticks around the temple and talks with the rabbis and the scribes, and they're amazed with the questions that he asks. You think people in Jerusalem or Nazareth might have remembered these things and might have been a little bit more open to that Jesus was a prophet, that there was more to Jesus than just a carpenter, than just the boy who lived next door, that maybe occasionally created a little mischief in town as a youth. If we look at some of the non-canonical books of the Bible, there's one, the book of Thomas, that does describe that maybe Jesus was a little bit more mischievous as a child. Apparently he was, in one story, was making a clay bird down by the banks of the river on the Sabbath. And this would have been a violation of Sabbath because he was making something. You couldn't do that. You couldn't do work on the Sabbath. And someone saw him, a rabbi saw him, and was apparently approaching him to, at best, scold him, if not maybe do something worse. And Jesus made the clay bird come alive and fly away, so there was no evidence that he had been doing anything wrong on the Sabbath. He apparently also, according to the book of Thomas, got mad at one of his instructors one time and muted him for a little bit, kind of thing. So, there might have been a little bit of rebellious side to Jesus as a youth, but they should have known something, don't you think? Now, we've known Jesus more than 30 years. We've known him about 2,000. Okay, maybe not personally. Maybe personally we've only known him, maybe 30 years plus or minus a decade or two. And so we know who Jesus is, and we have an advantage because we know the end of the story, right? We know Jesus as the Son of God. The people there knew him as a carpenter. So we should certainly be able to see Jesus, who Jesus is, as the prophet sent amongst us, as a prophet and a whole lot more than a prophet, but certainly as a prophet here amongst us. But do we know Jesus? Because with that 2,000 years of an opportunity to know Jesus comes along 2,000 of years of filters about who Jesus is and what Jesus does and what Jesus asks of us. Now, we've not personally seen Jesus, and neither have the majority of people in the last 2,000 years. But that hasn't kept artists from giving us renderings of what they think Jesus looks like and what Jesus was. And we've seen many of these pictures. Famous ones from masters that we've seen. And you'll notice that one of the things that we see in these pictures of Jesus that we know so well is Jesus is pretty generally clean. You don't see many sweaty and rumpled Jesus pictures, do you? His clothes are always nice. He is clean, even after rising from the dead. What do these pictures form of us? What kind of image do they tell us? What are they telling us about Jesus? Here we often see Jesus as a serene Jesus. Granted, Jesus is said to be the shepherd of us, the leaders of the lambs, but in actuality, he probably never was a shepherd. He was a carpenter, right? But he is a calm and serene Jesus. He holds the lambs and cares for them. He holds us. This is a good analogical picture. But what do we learn? What do we pick up from these photos? Then we have the glowing Jesus pictures, showing us other views of Jesus and how he might have appeared to us. Some of these are more modern pictures of Jesus, but these are all various representations. And each one we see and probably gives us some image, imparts upon us some ideas about Jesus. I like this one particularly. I'm pretty sure this is Jesus' high school yearbook photo. And I'm not want to make fun of any of these artists. They were doing their best to try to relay Jesus as they understand Jesus, as Jesus has been revealed to them. But that understanding was also formed by people who told them about Jesus. And some of these filters get passed on. And maybe we're seeing all of Jesus, or maybe not. And sometimes we get, I think we're up to the more powerful Jesuses, are we? Yes, we get Jesus here calming the seas on the storm, not so calm and serene, but showing his might. And then in a very modern photo or picture of him, we get Jesus duking it out with the devil here, arm wrestling over humanity, I suppose, here, and saving us. And then we also have the well-toned Jesus here. I understand that this was actually used in an advertisement. I don't know an advertisement for what, but we're now bringing Jesus into into the world here with advertisements. And so what is this communicating to us? In case you can't really see, the good news is that the little thing on the baby's head is not a crown of thorns. It's just a nice little wreath kind of thing put on his head. There's only Jesus has the crown of thorns and a little bit of blood, not too much, just one little poke there. So these are some things that we see, that we learn from them. What do these paintings impart to us? I haven't seen any pictures of Jesus eating with sinners. They talk about that in the Bible, but have you seen any paintings of Jesus eating with sinners? No. There's one photo I've seen, or painting, famous painting I've seen from one of the masters of Jesus laughing. And he's giving a good laugh, not just a little chuckle. But that's only one photo. That's only one painting I've ever seen of him laughing. And I strongly suspect that Jesus laughed more than once in his life. But these are images. Each one brings along something. And then we have some more modern renderings of Jesus that maybe show him a little gruffer, a little less clean. And there's this one. We actually have this picture out in the fellowship area out here. This is a picture that was painted by a Cain Karmitza. What's her last name? A young child. She's a prodigy, and a Cain Kramorik. She painted this. She grew up in a family that was non-religious. Her parents didn't take her to church. They didn't tell her Bible stories. They didn't read the Bible to her, and she started painting just out of nowhere at a very young age, religious paintings. And this one was done at about 7 or 8. It's remarkable for her skill as a painter. But this is what she saw of Jesus. And if you've read the story, Heaven is Real, you might remember the little boy there who dies in the hospital and goes to heaven and comes back. And his father's a pastor. And as his father is taking him from place to place, and they go to lots of churches, obviously, he keeps pointing out pictures of Jesus and saying, "Is that what he looked like?" And the boy keeps saying no, until he sees this picture. And he says, "That's Jesus." At least that's the Jesus that he saw in heaven. And sometimes art can show us things, more modern pictures, but like I say, they can enlighten us, but sometimes it can also constrict us. These are showing what images of Jesus looks like, what people thought. And sometimes art is amazing because it can answer questions that we've held for a long time that we've never known the answer to. And one of those is in the reading today. Paul says that he had a thorn in his side, in his flesh, that was bothering him, and he prayed 3 times for it to go away. And people have debated what that thorn was. Paul doesn't tell us. Some people think that maybe he had seizures that was the problem. Some people think that maybe he had some vision problems. That was what the thorn in his side that he talked about. But now through art we finally know the answer to this question, that the thorn in Paul's side was actually SpongeBob SquarePants. But these are all images. Sometimes we just get words. Read this to yourself. It's a description. And I don't need you to hold up your hands, but what kind of stream is this in your picture? Is this a mountain stream rushing down, splashing over rocks, almost making waterfalls as it comes down? Is this a very slow stream as it meanders through relatively flat ground? Is this a straight stream, or does it have a curve in it, a bend right before you? And what about the banks? Do they go steeply down into this stream in your picture? Or are they relatively easing into the stream? Rocky banks, or maybe banks of soil, or even sand. And what about that vegetation? What color is it? What kind of vegetation is it in your picture? Is it grass, bushes, trees, cactus? And what is memorizing about the water? Why is this person sitting there, spending time, drawn into this stream? And what wildlife is it that comes up and drinks? Deer, rabbits, Tyrannosaurus rex. This is one of the interesting things about images. Images, pictures, movies, they're wonderful, they're delightful, but they lock us into a particular view. They tell us precisely what this is, what we are to see. But when we get words like this, we have to create the image. And no two of our images are probably alike. The words free us to think about this and to build our own image. And that image may change even as we're thinking about it. Our stream may have looked one way, and then when we thought about it a little bit more, it may look a different way. And if we came and read these words next week, it might be a different stream that popped into our mind. And over time, our understanding of streams and of landscapes may alter the image that we have. And I say this because the pictures that we get of Jesus lock us into one understanding. They present a picture for us. They don't call us to use our imagination to think about who Christ is. And so, Christ came among the people, and he couldn't perform many miracles there. And this isn't because Christ was a little bit out of power. His batteries were run down that day. It was a kind of a cloudy day, and he couldn't recharge in the sun or something. No, this is not because we see Jesus as a miracle worker. We see Jesus bringing about God's redemptive works. And Jesus couldn't perform miracles there because the people did not hear his words, did not believe his words. They weren't open to God's redemptive work in them. And so that redemptive work couldn't take place. So let us read the words that Christ says. Let us read the works that Christ does. And let us build our image of who this Christ is. Let us come to know who this Christ is, a prophet amongst many other things that's been sent among us to reveal God's self to us, to reveal to us how we can have life abundant, life stronger than anything else. So let us not be trapped by the filters of 2,000 years of people putting their views of Jesus on us. Let us be open to hear Jesus speaking to us, speaking God's words to us, and walking forward in the wonder of that work, those words and those works. Let us be open to miracles happening amongst us. So the pictures are nice, but use your imagination. Who is Christ to you? Who is this Pan speaking to us these words?